a dog that mysteriously appears in church every Sunday. The congregation was baffled until they followed it home. What they discovered left them in tears. The bells of St. Michael's Church rang out across the sleepy town of Millbrook, calling the faithful to Sunday service. As the last chimes faded, a golden retriever trotted up the steps, its coat shimmering in the morning sun. Without hesitation, it nosed open the heavy wooden doors and slipped inside. Gasps rippled through the pews. "It's back," whispered Mrs. Henderson, clutching her pearls. This wasn't the first time the dog had appeared. For weeks, it had been a mysterious yet constant presence at every service. Pastor John paused mid-sermon, his eyes following the canine as it padded down the center aisle. The dog's gaze swept the congregation, searching, always searching. But for what? The air in the church seemed to thicken with curiosity and anticipation. The soft padding of paws on worn carpet echoed through the hushed silence. Children leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with wonder. Elderly parishioners exchanged glances, their weathered hands gripping hymnals a little tighter. As the dog made its way towards the altar, Pastor John cleared his throat, attempting to regain the congregation's attention. But it was futile. All eyes were fixed on this four-legged intruder, this golden mystery that had become an unexpected part of their Sunday ritual. Mrs. Henderson leaned towards her neighbor, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know, I've lived in Millbrook for 60 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this." Her companion nodded in agreement, their eyes never leaving the dog as it settled into a sitting position at the foot of the pulpit. Pastor John, realizing the futility of continuing his sermon, decided to address the elephant, or rather, the dog in the room. "Well, my friends," he began, a hint of amusement in his voice, "it seems we have a special guest with us once again. Perhaps the Lord works in mysterious ways, even through man's best friend." A soft chuckle rippled through the congregation, breaking the tension. But as quickly as it came, the laughter faded, replaced by a sense of reverence. There was something about this dog, something in its demeanor that commanded respect. As weeks turned to months, theories ran wild. Was it a stray, a sign from above, or something else entirely? The mystery deepened when someone noticed a worn collar hidden beneath its thick fur. There was a name, barely legible: Max. Tom, the groundskeeper, had been observing Max closely since his first appearance. "There's something in its eyes," he mused one day to Pastor John, "like it's carrying the weight of the world. I've seen that look before, in the eyes of soldiers coming home from war. It's a look that speaks of loyalty, of duty, of love." Pastor John nodded thoughtfully. "You might be onto something there, Tom. This dog, Max, he's not just wandering in here by chance. He's on a mission." As fall painted the trees of Millbrook in vibrant hues of red and gold, the town found itself divided. Some, like Mrs. Henderson, saw Max's presence as a divine sign. "It's a miracle," she proclaimed to anyone who'd listen, "a messenger from God himself." Others were more skeptical. "It's just a dog," Mr. Thompson, the town's resident cynic, would grumble. "Probably smells the leftover communion bread." But regardless of their stance, one thing was clear: Max had become a part of Millbrook's fabric. His weekly appearances were now as anticipated as Pastor John's sermons. Children would peer out the church windows, waiting for that first glimpse of golden fur. Even Mr. Thompson, for all his grumbling, would glance towards the door as the service began. Max's behavior during the services was a subject of endless fascination. He would sit quietly, head slightly bowed, throughout the sermon. During hymns, some swore they could hear him humming along, though others dismissed this as fancy. One particularly memorable Sunday, as the choir reached a crescendo in "Amazing Grace," Max let out a soft, melodious howl. The sound blended so perfectly with the music that for a moment, the entire congregation fell silent in awe. If this story has touched your heart so far, make sure to subscribe for more incredible tales that remind us of the power of love and companionship. As winter approached, bringing with it a chill that seeped into bones and hearts alike, the mystery of Max took on a new urgency. The dog, once plump and glossy-coated, was starting to look leaner. His golden fur, while still beautiful, had lost some of its luster. "He's not being cared for properly," Mrs. Henderson fretted one Sunday, watching Max make his way down the aisle. "Someone needs to do something." Her words struck a chord. The congregation, which had been content to marvel at the mystery, now felt a responsibility towards their canine visitor. But every attempt to approach Max after the service was met with the same result. He would simply trot away, disappearing into the town as if he had never been there. It was Sarah, Pastor John's 10-year-old daughter, who finally made a breakthrough. On a crisp December morning, as the congregation filed out of the church, Sarah noticed Max limping slightly. Without hesitation, she approached him, her hand outstretched. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. Max paused, his intelligent eyes fixed on Sarah. For a moment, it seemed he might bolt, but then slowly, he lowered his head, allowing Sarah to gently stroke his fur. "Oh, Dad," Sarah called out, her voice trembling with emotion. "He's so thin. I can feel his ribs." That was the tipping point. The mystery had been intriguing, even inspiring. But now, faced with the reality of a suffering creature, the town of Millbrook knew it was time to act. A group formed, led by Pastor John, and including Tom the groundskeeper, Mrs. Henderson, and even the reluctant Mr. Thompson. Their mission: to follow Max and uncover the truth behind his weekly pilgrimages. The next Sunday, as Max left the church, they trailed behind at a respectful distance. The dog led them to the town, past the bustling market where shopkeepers paused in their work to watch the procession, beyond the old mill where the creak of ancient wooden wheels seemed to whisper ancient secrets. As they reached the outskirts of town, a sense of anticipation built. What would they find? A neglectful owner? An abandoned home? The possibilities were endless, and each step brought them closer to the truth. Finally, Max came to a stop in front of a small, dilapidated house. The windows were dark, the paint peeling. An air of neglect hung over the property like a shroud. Max scratched at the door, whining softly. The group exchanged glances. This was it, the moment of truth. Pastor John stepped forward, his heart pounding. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. No answer came. Slowly, hesitantly, he turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a sight that left them all breathless. Lying in a bed, surrounded by photos and mementos, was an elderly man. His chest rose and fell with labored breaths. And there, clutched in his trembling hand, was a photo of himself, years younger, standing proudly next to Max. The room was dim, lit only by a sliver of sunlight peeking through tattered curtains. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of illness and neglect. But amidst the decay, there was an undeniable sense of love. Max padded softly to the bed, gently placing his head on the old man's hand. The man's eyes fluttered open, a smile of recognition spreading across his weathered face. "Max," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came back. Good boy." Tears welled in Pastor John's eyes as the pieces fell into place. This was Max's owner, too ill to leave his bed. And every Sunday, without fail, Max had been attending church in his place, carrying his master's faith when he no longer could. The revelation hit the group like a physical force. Mrs. Henderson let out a soft sob. Her earlier theories about divine messengers forgotten in the face of this very human, very earthly love. Even Mr. Thompson, the eternal skeptic, found himself blinking back tears. "Sir," Pastor John said gently, approaching the bed, "I'm Pastor John from St. Michael's. Your dog, Max. He's been coming to our church every Sunday." The old man's eyes, clouded with cataracts, searched for Pastor John's face. "Has he now?" he said, a note of pride in his weak voice. "That's my Max. Always knew when it was time for church. Didn't want me to miss out, I suppose." As the old man spoke, his story unfolded. His name was George Miller, a lifelong resident of Millbrook. He had adopted Max as a puppy 15 years ago, shortly after his wife passed away. "He saved me," George said, his hand resting on Max's head. "Gave me a reason to keep going." Every Sunday, rain or shine, George and Max would attend services at St. Michael's. It was more than just a religious obligation. It was their special time together, a weekly ritual that gave structure and meaning to their lives. But 6 months ago, George had fallen ill. A stroke had left him bedridden, unable to care for himself, let alone attend church. "I told Max he'd have to go on without me," George said, his voice breaking. Never thought he'd actually do it. The impact of this revelation rippled through the group. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a display of loyalty and love that transcended human understanding. Max, driven by devotion, had continued their weekly ritual, a silent emissary for his ailing master. Pastor John knelt beside the bed, taking George's frail hand in his. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "your faith and Max's dedication have touched us all deeply. Please, let us help you." And so began a new chapter in the story of Max and the Millbrook congregation. Word spread quickly through the town, and soon a network of support formed around George and Max. Meals were prepared and delivered daily. A rotation of volunteers ensured George had company and that his modest home was kept clean. Max, no longer needing to stand vigil alone, began to regain his strength and vitality. But perhaps the most touching gesture came on Sundays. Each week, a group from the church would gather at George's home. They would bring portable speakers to play the service live, and Pastor John would personally deliver communion. And there, in that small living room that had once been a place of loneliness and sorrow, a new kind of congregation formed. George, propped up in his bed with Max by his side, would listen to the sermon with tears of gratitude in his eyes. The room would fill with the voices of his neighbors, singing hymns and sharing in the joy of community. Max, for his part, seemed to glow with contentment, his mission accomplished. He could now split his time between the church and his beloved master's side. On the Sundays, when George felt strong enough, a special wheelchair was brought in, and Max would proudly walk beside him as they made their way to St. Michael's, the entire congregation cheering their arrival. As months passed, the story of Max and George spread beyond the borders of Millbrook. News outlets picked up the tale, and soon visitors from neighboring towns would come to St. Michael's, hoping to catch a glimpse of the faithful dog and his devoted owner. But for the people of Millbrook, Max and George were no longer just a heartwarming story. They had become a symbol of something greater, a reminder of the power of faith, the strength of community, and the enduring bond between humans and their animal companions. Pastor John found himself weaving the lessons learned from Max and George into his sermons. He spoke of loyalty, of the importance of checking on our neighbors, of the myriad ways love can manifest itself. Max's journey to our church wasn't just about attending service, he would say, his voice ringing out in the now-packed church. It was a testament to the extraordinary lengths we'll go to for those we love. In our darkest moments, sometimes it's not human hands that lift us up, but the soft paw of a faithful friend. The impact on the town was profound. Neighbors who had once been strangers now greeted each other warmly on the streets. The local animal shelter saw a surge in adoptions as people opened their hearts and homes to animals in need. Mrs. Henderson, once known for her gossip, now led a group of volunteers who visited homebound members of the community. Mr. Thompson, the former cynic, could be seen walking shelter dogs every afternoon, a soft smile on his once stern face. As for George, the love and support of his community seemed to work miracles. While he would never fully recover from his stroke, he regained enough strength to sit in his porch on sunny days, Max ever present at his side. He became a beloved figure in Millbrook, with people of all ages stopping by to chat, seek advice, or simply bask in the warmth of his gentle spirit. One crisp autumn morning, almost a year to the day since Max's mystery had been solved, George passed away peacefully in his sleep. Max, as always, was by his side. The town mourned, but there was a bittersweet beauty to their grief. George had not died alone and forgotten, but surrounded by love and community. His life and Max's devotion had changed them all for the better. Max, now a beloved member of the community in his own right, was adopted by Pastor John and his family. And every Sunday, without fail, he would take his place in the front pew of St. Michael's, a living reminder of the lesson he had taught them all. If this story has moved you, remember to like and share. Together, we can spread messages of love, loyalty, and compassion. As the years passed, the legend of Max and George became an integral part of Millbrook's identity. Parents would tell their children the story, using it to teach lessons about kindness, perseverance, and the unbreakable bonds of love. The church instituted an annual Blessing of the Animals service in Max's honor, where pets of all kinds were welcomed into the sanctuary. It became a joyous celebration of the animal-human bond, filled with barks, meows, and the occasional squawk. But perhaps the most lasting impact was a change in the town's collective heart. People began to look at their own lives differently, questioning what truly mattered. Acts of kindness, both big and small, became the norm rather than the exception. The story of Max and George had shown them that heroism doesn't always wear a cape or wield a sword. Sometimes, it wags a tail and offers a paw in friendship. It had taught them that faith can manifest in the most unexpected ways, and that love, pure, selfless love, has the power to transform not just individuals, but entire communities. As Max grew older, his visits to the church became less frequent, but his legacy lived on. The front pew where he used to sit was adorned with a small plaque that read, "Max's Seat," in honor of a dog who showed us the true meaning of faith and loyalty. And on quiet mornings, when the sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's, casting colorful patterns on the worn carpet, some swore they could hear the faint jingle of a collar, a soft patting of paws. A reminder that love, in its purest form, knows no boundaries, not even those between species or between this world and the next. The tale of Max and George became more than just a local legend. It sparked a movement, inspiring people far beyond the borders of Millbrook to look at their own communities with fresh eyes, to see the invisible threads that connect us all, human and animal alike. In a world that often seems divided, the story of a faithful dog and his devoted owner became a beacon of hope. It reminded people that sometimes the most profound truths come not from grand gestures or elaborate philosophies, but from the simple, unwavering love of a dog for his human. As you go about your day, remember the lesson of Max and George. Look for the quiet heroes in your own life, the ones who show up day after day with nothing but love in their hearts. They might have 2 legs, or they might have 4, but their impact can change the world one small act of kindness at a time. In the end, the story of Max and George is a reminder that we are all connected in this great tapestry of life, that the love we give, whether to humans or animals, ripples out into the world in ways we may never fully comprehend. It's a call to open our hearts, to extend a hand or a paw in friendship, and to never underestimate the power of unwavering loyalty. So the next time you see a dog walking down the street or hear the distant sound of church bells, take a moment to remember Max and George. Let their story inspire you to be a little kinder, a little more understanding, and a little more open to the miracles that surround us every day. For in the end, it's not about the grand gestures or the epic tales. It's about the small acts of love, repeated day after day, that truly change the world. And sometimes, just sometimes, those acts of love come with a wagging tail and a heart full of unconditional devotion. As the sun sets on another day in Millbrook, casting long shadows across St. Michael's churchyard, a golden retriever can sometimes be seen sitting quietly by a simple gravestone. Visitors often pause, moved by the sight, not realizing they're witnessing the continuation of a love story that touched countless hearts. This is where Max spends his twilight years, a living link between past and present. His muzzle may be grayed, his step a little slower, but his eyes still shine with the same unwavering devotion that once led him to church every Sunday. Pastor John, now with streaks of silver in his hair, often joins Max during these quiet vigils. "You know," he'll say to visitors, his voice soft with reverence, "Max taught us all that faith isn't just about words or rituals. It's about showing up day after day for those we love. It's about being a light in someone's darkest hour." The legacy of Max and George continues to shape Millbrook in subtle yet profound ways. The town has become known as a haven for both humans and animals in need. A new wing was added to the local shelter, named George's Place, where elderly pets find loving homes for their final years. The community rallies around its most vulnerable members, ensuring that no one faces life's challenges alone. In schools, the story of Max and George is part of the curriculum, teaching children about empathy, responsibility, and the deep bonds that can form between humans and animals. It's not uncommon to see young students volunteering at the shelter or organizing fundraisers for animal welfare causes. But perhaps the most touching tribute came in the form of a new tradition at St. Michael's. Every year, on the anniversary of George's passing, the church holds a special service. The doors are left wide open, welcoming not just the regular congregation, but anyone, human or animal, who wishes to attend. On these days, the church fills with an eclectic mix of people and pets. Dogs of all sizes sit patiently in pews, cats perch regally on laps, and even the occasional rabbit or guinea pig can be spotted. The air fills with a cacophony of sounds, barks, meows, and the joyous laughter of children, all blending together in a strange yet beautiful harmony. Pastor John, standing at the pulpit with Max faithfully by his side, looks out over this unconventional congregation with a smile. In this moment, he'll say, his voice carrying over the gentle chaos, "We are reminded that love knows no boundaries, that faith can wear many forms, and that sometimes the greatest teachers of compassion and loyalty walk on four legs." As the years pass, Max's visits to the church become less frequent. His age catches up with him, and there are days when the walk from Pastor John's home to St. Michael's is too much for his arthritic legs. But on the days he does make it, the entire town seems to hold its breath in reverence. Children whisper excitedly, pointing out the now famous dog to their younger siblings. Elderly parishioners reach out gnarled hands to pat his head as he passes, their eyes misty with memories. And as Max settles into his usual spot in the front pew, there's a collective sense that all is right with the world. One crisp autumn morning, much like the day when the mystery was first solved, Max doesn't wake up. He passes peacefully in his sleep, curled up in his bed at Pastor John's home. The news spreads quickly through Millbrook, and a palpable sense of loss settles over the town. But amidst the sorrow, there's also a profound sense of gratitude. Max had lived a long, full life, touched countless hearts, and left the world a better place than he found it. His legacy, intertwined with George's, had become a part of Millbrook's very soul. The funeral held for Max is unlike any the town has ever seen. It's not a somber affair, but a celebration of a life well lived and a love that transcended all boundaries. People share stories. Laughter mingles with tears, and the church rings with heartfelt renditions of "All Things Bright and Beautiful." As the service concludes, Pastor John stands to deliver a final eulogy. His voice, thick with emotion, carries clearly through the packed church. "Max came into our lives as a mystery," he begins, "but he leaves us having taught us the most profound truths about love, loyalty, and faith. He showed us that sometimes the purest expressions of these virtues come not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of showing up day after day for those we love." He pauses, looking out over the congregation, seeing the impact of Max's story reflected in every face. In a world that often seems divided, Max reminded us of our shared humanity and our connection to all living beings. He taught us that love is not limited by species, that faith can wear many forms, and that true loyalty knows no bounds. As we say goodbye to Max, let us carry forward the lessons he taught us. Let us be more kind, more compassionate, more present for one another. Let us see the world through his eyes, a place where every person, every creature is worthy of love and respect. And let us remember always that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism come not with fanfare and glory, but with a wagging tail and a heart full of unconditional love. As Pastor John's words fade, a soft breeze wafts through the open church doors, carrying with it the scent of autumn leaves and the faint jingle of what sounds like a dog's collar. For a moment, it's as if Max is there, making one final round through his beloved church. The story of Max and George, of unwavering faith and boundless love, becomes more than just a local legend. It spreads far beyond Millbrook, touching hearts and changing lives across the country and even around the world. It serves as a reminder that love, in its purest form, has the power to bridge all gaps, heal all wounds, and light the way through even the darkest of times. And in Millbrook, whenever the church bells ring out on a Sunday morning, the townspeople smile, remembering a golden retriever who taught them the true meaning of faith, loyalty, and love. They look at their own pets with renewed appreciation, hug their loved ones a little tighter, and set out to make the world a little bit better, one small act of kindness at a time. For in the end, that's what Max's story was all about. The profound impact that love in all its forms can have on the world. It's a legacy that continues to inspire, to uplift, and to remind us all of the extraordinary bonds that connect us, not just each other, but to all living beings. And so, as the sun sets on another day in Millbrook, casting long shadows across St. Michael's churchyard, if you listen closely, you might just hear the faint echo of paws on ancient stone, a gentle reminder that love, true love, never really ends. It simply takes on new forms, continuing to guide us, inspire us, and bring light to our lives, long after those we've loved have left this earthly realm. In that enduring love, in that unwavering faith, Max and George live on, not just in memory, but in the countless acts of kindness and compassion they continue to inspire. And in that, perhaps, lies the truest miracle of all,